In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate 2 tips for the backwards loop cast on that just may reduce some frustration and improve tension. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. There are 2 ways of creating a simple cast on, also called an E-wrap or backwards loop cast on. One method is very familiar to many knitters because it's the same technique you use when you're doing the long tail cast on, which is to swing your thumb over the top of the yarn to the back and around, and then you slip this twisted loop onto the needle. Now, so this twisted loop twists to the right, and the right leg of that twisted loop hangs over the back of the needle. So you have to work this twisted loop through the right leg on the subsequent row around, which means you'd have to work it through the back. Now, all of your other stitches are probably going to be worked through the front, so that would mean that these particular stitches have to be worked differently than any other stitches on the needle. So the alternative is to use your forefinger and bring it to the front and then swing it under. And that creates a strand that's lying on your index finger, so it goes to the left, see, angles to the left. You point at yourself and then you bring your needle so it's pointing toward you as well through this back loop. Let your finger out. And it's also creating a twisted loop on the needle. This time it's twisting to the left, and the right leg of the stitch is hanging over the front. So that means on the next row around, you'll be working this through the front just like you're working all of your other stitches. So again, you bring your finger around to the front and then under, and you can tell you've done it right because the yarn is lying to the left over your finger. Point at yourself and bring the needle through the back. And that creates a left twisting backwards loop with the leg that you knit through hanging over the front of the needle. Now this is going to work whether you're knitting in the round, whether you've cast on in the middle of a row, whether you're casting on at the end of the row. The only time this doesn't work is if you have cast on at the end of a row, you're knitting flat, and the very first stitch that you have to work is going to be a purl stitch. This particular setup won't allow that first stitch to be purled. You can purl all the other ones just fine, but this one won't work. So what you can do is if you're casting on at the end of a row, you can use this forefinger method of casting on until you get to the very last stitch. And then you could use this thumb method, which will create a stitch that the cast on stitch is going to twist in the opposite direction. It's unlikely anyone is going to notice that, but it will allow you to purl this first stitch. Again, because it's the one created with a thumb, you're going to have to purl it by entering from the back leg, but you will be able to purl this stitch and pull the loop through. And from then on, you can always purl or knit whatever you want through this front leg. It would just be that first one. If that first one is a purl, then that particular loop needs to be cast on using that thumb method. If you need to cast on a large number of stitches using the simple cast on, what I do is I cast on 1 fewer stitch than I need for every 5 or 6 stitches. So if I needed 12 stitches, I would only cast on 10, and then I'd make up for them as I worked across that first row. So here I have cast on 5. So let's say I do need 12. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 stitches and I need 12. So for every 5 stitches I work, I'm going to create a new stitch. So I've knit 5 and I can pull a little bit here. That pulls out some of the excess slack. And now I'm going to do a make 1. I'm going to lift that strand up on my needle and then I'm going to knit through the back. So I've created that 6th stitch. So this type of cast on sometimes does create extra slack as you're working it. If you work very close to the tips, you can kind of avoid introducing or pulling out any of that slack. But if you do happen to be pulling apart like this, and you see that you're getting extra slack, then that's why this method of creating a make 1 using that extra slack is a useful idea. There's my 12th one. So these are my 12 stitches that I created out of 10 cast on stitches. Whether or not you prefer the left twisting version of the backwards loop cast on to the right twisting version, I think you'll find the second tip useful the next time you need to cast on a large number of stitches using the backwards loop cast on. If you find my technique videos helpful, you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi.com. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.